Mitra, let's talk about conflict.
Let's.
So, conflict is a part of our lives. We have conflict with family members, with colleagues, with business partners, with uh, romantic partners. What is the first step for you when conflict arises?
I look at why am I facing this conflict? What's in it for me? Believe it or not, I'm quite self-centered that way.
Mhm.
I look at it and see why am I experiencing this? Not in a complaining way, but in a curiosity way of because I see conflict as an opportunity to expand.
Mm,
I'm having something is tight, doesn't feel right, and there's expansion sort of message coming to me. So what am I not understanding? It's the first thing that comes to my awareness. What am I not understanding? Whoever it is, whatever the situation. So what am I not understanding about the situation, about the person that I'm having conflict with? And more importantly, what am I not understanding about myself?
mm,
It's the
mm.
first thing that comes to me.
Yeah. So what I hear from you is there's a desire to want to resolve the conflict
Absolutely.
because not only a desire to want to resolve the conflict, but there's an openness
Mhm.
to um, this conflict, right? And
Mhm.
that's very different than I think how a lot of people might experience it, which
Mhm.
might be, oftentimes when there's a conflict, I have my point of view, they have their point of view, and they don't see my point of view. And I'm angry that they don't see my point of view. And so for me, the resolution would be in this hypothetical scenario that they see my point of view. Then the conflict is over, right? But what I hear you saying is, well, this is an opportunity for growth. There's something I'm not seeing, and there's curiosity to explore, to discover
Yes.
what's really happening. Yeah.
Yes. So in
So
that case, the resolution really is for me to understand that which I didn't understand or that which I misunderstood. And hence the resolution does not depend on the fact, let's say you and I are having conflict. It does not lie in the fact that you are now convinced of my point. If I understood why this conflict came to my awareness, I have resolved the purpose of that conflict. It has very little to do with you and what you do or don't do after that. I know it sounds too mythology like, but that's exactly why conflicts come to our awareness so
Mhm.
that we can expand through it. Believe it or not, once I look at it that way, this is just my experience, the conflict itself also resolves itself. First of all,
Mm,
because I'm not so hung up on it and
mm.
focused on it. And secondly, because I'm not like conflicting with you, you probably have more room to move and be not as rigid in your views.
Then what's the next step for you?
Well, it's not so. So I wanted to really expand this a little bit because it sounded okay. That's nice. Okay, that's very like spiritual way of looking at it. But let me give you an example that I saw a very tangible example of real everyday life. I was speaking to a couple, and there was a bit of conflict around the movies that they choose to see together. Okay, it's a very light
Important.
issue. I mean, it sounds light as opposed to whether we should have children or not,
Yeah.
something like that. But or where should we move countries or not? So that sounded very light. And I was listening to them, and one of them was saying, the way the whole conversation started, he said, "My spouse does not like going to the movies or seeing movies." And I had just heard earlier on where she was referring to, a movie that they saw together. I said she doesn't like to go to movies or she doesn't like to go to movies that you choose. And that opened up apparently a whole history that they have with each other.
Mhm.
And she said, exactly. And so, but the way he had phrased it was not a a bad thing because it was how he saw the problem. In his
Mm-hmm.
head, truly, the problem was that my spouse, my partner, my life partner, does not like to see movies.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because every time I pick one, she says no. Isn't that fascinating? That if I see it that way, she's the problem. And until she changes, my conflict with her around movie will not be resolved.
Mm-hmm.
You see, very simple. It couldn't get any simpler and less important as far as like major life events in a life of a couple is concerned. And that opened up a conversation for hours, which was fascinating to listen to and be witness to,
Yeah.
because that was, I always say the way I do anything is the way I do everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like that. Where else am I not seeing their point of view? Where else do
Mm-hmm.
I think my way is the best way? And if you're not doing it, that means you don't have a way at all.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why the curiosity about what is actually happening is so crucial. Yeah, for me, I've learned to question my point of view, to
Mm,
question if my point of view is based on what is really happening or not. And the only way I can find out is by having a conversation with that person, an open, curious conversation.
mm,
I express what's coming up for me. I express what I've observed, right?
mm.
The NVC framework, which
Yeah,
we both love, right? Which is I
yes,
noticed this happen. I noticed you said this thing,
yeah,
and it made me imagine because it's all really in our imagination. It
yes.
made me in this example, it made me imagine you don't like movies,
Mhm,
um, which made me feel whatever frustrated. I'm just curious to hear your point of view,
mhm,
right? So there's no blaming. There's no you made me feel this way and whatnot. It's like no, this is what I'm imagining, and this is how I'm making me feel. Um, and it's incredible. It's incredible what comes out of those conversations and how reliably it strengthens my connection with people.
mhm. Yes, or
And
with
and so
yourself.
yeah, with myself and with other people.
Yeah,
So to add to your paradigm of this is an opportunity for growth for me, it's also an opportunity to strengthen a connection that I have with someone. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And when you said the only way to do it is to have a conversation with the other person, but also with yourself, because as you said, Dr. Rosenberg always spoke about this, and it was fascinating. He said there is no way. Dr. Rosenberg is the founder of nonviolent communication, by the way, for those of you that didn't understand the reference to NBC. Um, he used to talk about the fact that no one ever is responsible for the way you feel. How about
Mm-hmm.
that? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that statement, it was said, of course, I met him 4 decades ago, so a long time ago. But that was an amazing statement to make. I mean, I remember that I repeated that as I was driving away from the center we met. It was like, wow, no one is ever. I mean, that was a revolution in my mind then, because I kept thinking, only if my friend doesn't do this, only if my mother doesn't
Mm-hmm.
say that, only if my brother. So I was like all in that world, and when I heard that, that really changed my paradigm. And I thought, oh, so if they are not responsible for it, then what is? And then you completely go to a different place. That was one thing that I remember that changed in me. The other thing was the difference between facts and those things that I made up, my story
Mm-hmm.
that I
Yeah.
made up. So the first step, that's why in NVC, the first step is what are the facts? For instance, in this story between the couple, the fact was they have not been able to agree on common movies that they can watch together. That was the fact. Simple. You see, in that, there is no accusation, there's no better or worse, there's no right or wrong. They're two people wanting to spend their spare time together and watching some entertaining or educating, whatever their purpose is, movies. The fact is, we have not been able to do that. Had the person who said the other partner doesn't want to watch movies had just come up with that statement, it would have clarified a lot. That's why I think
Mm.
Dr. Rosenberg was a genius to come up with this something so simple and so amazing. What are the facts? So just separate your emotional story that I think like they never cooperate and blah 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 everything we say with the fact. The fact is we've been together for this long. Put the number in. We have not been able to come up with something that we like. I said, okay.
Yeah, and let's clarify what are not facts. You never want to go to the movie is not a fact, right?
Anything that has ever and never is not a fact.
So there are things that we think are facts, but they're not actual facts. I had a
Yes.
friend tell me once, it's like if you can record it with a device, like either on video or on voice, then it's a fact. Anything else is your imagination. So you leave it out.
Yes. We dare to say publicly, you know, Ben has never ever, you can't. You just can't. Yeah. So yes, so those are the facts. The fact is, fact usually the most important part of understanding the fact does not contain people, it contains events. That's the best way for me to understand it.
Mm.
So let's say I say Ben always comes late. Okay. First of all, the flag is always. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that there is a person involved that is not usually me. That's another
Yeah.
sign. And also the energy with which I'm saying it. But if I say we normally start our meetings late, okay, that can be a fact if that's correct. If you always
Even late is not a fact because late is perspective. So we normally start meetings after the time we agreed to meet. Because what's someone starting a meeting 5 minutes late is not late for them. For a lot of people, that's not late, or 10 minutes. For another person, it could be late, you know? So
yes.
I know these things are nuanced, but when we can really just state things as they are, it
Yes.
reduces the charge of the conversation significantly. Yeah.
Yes. And that depends on our agreements. So you and I may have flexibility, and we do. But if there is a place that, let's say, when I see clients, I don't have flexibility because I have clients after them or commitments after them. So that's a very specific time frame that we need to be together. And we can speak about it, and that's okay. But we need to be factual, and that step, I always say, out of these 4 steps for NVC, if you've only picked one and just tried that, because altogether, as simple as it sounds, is not easy. But if I just started with being able to separate facts from Mitra's stories, I think I'm really, really grown a lot.
Yeah.
When I say, and I literally say it out loud, I ask myself, I often
Mm.
talk to myself actually.
Yeah.
So I say, Mitra, just a second. What are the facts here? And my whole body settles down because now the emotions are on one side and the fact is, and then when I look at the fact and I think, okay, maybe it's not as extreme
Yep.
as
It's huge.
maybe.
It's huge. I went through this exercise recently, just a couple of weeks ago. I write it
Uh-huh,
down. I write
uh-huh,
down the facts.
uh-huh.
Well, if it's something that has a big charge, I'll actually write it down. Like what actually happened. Let's just state the facts, right?
Mhm, mhm.
What actually happened, and what am I adding? You know. Well, then it becomes clear when I look at the facts and I compare it to how I'm feeling and the story I'm telling myself. It really says a lot. Yeah.
Yes. And the reason you and I are both laughing because we have practiced this. When you write it down or when you say it out loud, then you realize how far sometimes you are from the actual facts of what happened. So that's the first step. And the next step is, what am I feeling? Then now you're separating, as I said, that's why I think it's brilliant. Now I'm separating my feelings from the facts. So what are my feelings? Okay, I'm really activated. I'm really this. I'm demoralized. Whatever it is, like I'm angry. But we need to be more specific. I've learned that anger is a very much like what I call a blanket kind of emotion. But when I'm specific, I'm like I'm very disappointed. Or sometimes people say the most common one is, which is fascinating to me. I feel disrespected.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. Your whoever wanted to go out with whoever without adding you feel disrespected? I mean, it's so unusual. Let's say, like, after this meeting, you want to go to lunch with somebody else and do not include me. And I feel disrespected. Do you see how odd that sounds when I say it out loud? Like you have no permission to go out without me and seeing your friends and having lunch? Because what? We're
Yeah.
related or we work together or we like each other or we're friends?
Yeah. There's a story we're telling ourselves in the
Yeah.
background. Yeah.
Yes. So the feelings, and to just close that cycle so we can talk about it, then every feeling we have is based on needs that have been met and needs that have not been met. So when I say I feel good, that means the needs that I came with to this meeting is being met. And when I say I don't feel good, that means those needs have not been met or are not being met. So when we identify the need, now we're getting really into the needy greedy of what's truly going on. And of course, now you see, you didn't even come to the discussion until the fourth step. So I thought I was having conflict with you. I recognized the facts. I separated them from feelings. I identified my needs. And now you come into the picture. And the real thing is, what is my request? What is my request of you that, in my view, might solve, resolve, as you called it, this conflict that we're having? And in the case of the couple, we got to a point that really, once everything was identified, it was my request is let's get together. And I drew two circles. In one circle, wrote down everything that this person likes and needs. And the other one like and need. And then we found the part, it was a very small slice in their case, but there was a part that these two circles actually met each other and integrated. So it's a small piece of two different circles. This one works, and after work, they want something soothing. This one works, and after work, they want something provoking.
Mm.
But there existed a common place where they both could meet, and then now they have clarity of what kind of movies they're looking for in order to see with each other, and also they have the option of satisfying it without the person. I can always ask you to come to a movie with me instead of waiting for Henry to definitely love to spend his time with me at the movies for the ones that I want to see. I can find a friend that says, I love this kind of documentaries and this kind of music, and then I could go with them.
I will just say this.
Huh.
I want to add this. It can be a tricky thing. It's not uncommon that what we think we need is not really a need, and that the need that we have and that we're expecting from the other continues the conflict. And
Yes.
so needs are something to be really looked at and reflected on closely. And I think I'm just going to add this before we close that another way, if you're not super clear on your needs, is to also just make it an exploratory thing. So you might not even be super clear what your needs are. First, you want to understand their perspective and their point of view. So
Yes.
you get clear on the facts, you get clear on how you're feeling, you get clear on the story you're telling yourself, because there's always some sort of story that we're telling ourselves.
Yes.
You clear that that's not a story. That's the story I'm telling myself. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm responsible for my feelings, but this is what I'm telling myself. Now I'm curious to hear your point of view. And that
Yeah.
opens up a whole dialogue where almost invariably we learn things, we realize things that we didn't realize about the other person, how they're viewing it and how we were seeing it in the wrong way. And that could also help us in that process get clear on our needs.
Yeah. Then we make it more complicated before we leave. Need is not the only one that is complicated and tricky. Facts are tricky. feelings are tricky, requests are tricky.
Yeah.
And we would love to unfold that, because when I say I'm requesting this, usually I'm really demanding, but I'm saying when I say this is fact, I'm really saying these are my facts. So that's not the whole 4 steps are tricky, and we will unfold it in the next episode. How about that?
Let's do that.
Let's do that. Take
Until
care.
next time.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. For a list of the links and other resources referenced in this episode, check out the podcast description.
If you're benefiting from our podcast, we'd love if you could help us reach more people by subscribing. Your support means the world to us. From our hearts to yours, we thank you.